For example, Dr. Eby, he described, he said that his sort of reasoning power was greatly increased. His thought processes were much more powerful. He could see much, much further. He could hear much more. His hearing was much more powerful. His whole body was just a much better upgrade model, if you like. But then what do they see? Well, first of all, they often describe walking either on streets of transparent gold, as it says in Revelation 21, or walking in fields of flowers, but these flowers are radiating light. Light comes from the trees and the flowers and the grass. And there's not only light coming from the trees and the flowers and the grass, but music as well. And here's an amazing thing. Many people have said, Richard, it's an extraordinary thing, but you can see music in heaven. Now, I can't explain that. I just can't explain that, but they say you can see the music in heaven. And then they say there's no sun there, but light just comes from the trees and the flowers and the grass. People have seen the river of life. Some people have seen the throne of God, that's God the Father, which is very big actually. It's many people said it's up to 3 stories high. And there's a rainbow over the throne, just like it says in the scriptures. Many people have seen this great lake in front of the throne, and people have seen crowds and crowds of people around the throne of God, all praising God. And remember, you can see the music. Now, people have been transported around different parts of heaven. We tend to think of heaven as a place. It's a huge, huge place. It's huge. It's massive. It's outside time, which is difficult for us to comprehend. But another thing is people can travel to different parts of heaven instantaneously. People have looked up to mountains and said, I'd like to be there, and they would instantly be there. People have met their angels, their personal angels. Psalm 91 says we have our own personal angels, and many people have seen their own personal angels. It's amazing. It's absolutely... one woman I'm thinking of met her own child in heaven. This little girl, she was only 10, she was killed by a truck or a lorry. This was in the States, and when she got to heaven, there's this little child playing in a beautiful garden. And she was ecstatically happy, playing with a lot of other children as well. And in fact, this particular lady said to the little girl, wouldn't you like to come back to Earth? And she said, well, Jesus said I could. But actually it was such fun here, I decided to stay here. So there we are. So that's heaven. Heaven is just dramatic. In fact, you can always tell when people have been to heaven, because they're just yearning to go back. Most of the people who I've met who've really seen heaven just wanted to be there.
It is clear that adults who experience NDEs are influenced by their religious and cultural value system. But what about those who are not yet influenced by culture or religion? Young children. Will they give us a better view on NDE?
So it's then a matter of religious belief systems as to whether you think that other reality is real or not. So that's the issue of religion and philosophy. But nevertheless, when I say near-death experiences are real, I mean that they occur when these children say that they're happening, which means at the point of death. Let me give you an example. I resuscitated a young boy about 8 years old who had massive cardiac failure in the lobby of Seattle Children's Hospital. Dramatic resuscitation. After we successfully brought him back to life, he opened his eyes and he goes, "That was weird. You guys just sucked me back into my body." He accurately described everything that was happening to him. He could see the top of one of our attending physicians' heads who was starting to go bald, and accurately described that, even though we knew at this time he was comatose. In addition, he said that while he was being resuscitated and his heart had stopped, he was on the ceiling looking down at us, and he was bathed in a white light. A white light that he thought was something trying to keep him safe. So what if that experience could be a hallucination? Well, clearly he accurately described what happened to him, so that part wasn't a hallucination. But you could say the hallucinatory elements then were this white light. Is that white light real or not? I don't know.
Before we can understand this strange phenomenon, we have to understand the nature of the near-death experience itself.
When we die, we go through a fairly rigorous series of events. And a picture that a child drew of nearly drowning, I think, illustrates this better than anything else. And we can see in this picture, the first thing he draws when he nearly drowned is he states that hands reached inside his body and pulled him out. Doesn't identify who these hands belong to. But then these hands plunged him into darkness. And it's clear that this darkness that's part of the near-death experience is the darkness that's the absence of sensation and input from our body. So the hallmark of the dying experience is that we're conscious and awake while we're dying. But we're not receiving input anymore from our eyes or our ears or our proprioceptive, our touch senses, or any of those kinds of senses. So of course we perceive darkness. So the first stage of the dying experience is to have the perception of darkness.
I suddenly found myself in a standing upright position, wide awake. I knew I was awake. The trouble was, it was pitch black. And my first thought was, why on earth those doctors can't turn the lights out in here? What kind of hospital is this? As I stood there, wondering how long I'd been asleep for and why the lights were out, I thought, well, don't freak out. Let your eyes accustom to the dark. Maybe you've woken up too quick. So I kept looking, thinking my pupils had dilated. No light. Couldn't see a thing. It was pitch black, like a dark room. So, well, okay. There must be some light in here somewhere. So I turned around 360 degrees, checking out to see if there's some light. Couldn't see a thing. As I went out to my right, I couldn't find the wall. I thought, that's weird. Have they moved me? So I started moving back to the left, groping around looking for my beard. Couldn't find it. I thought, great, you idiot, now you've lost your beard. How on earth did you do that? So as I'm groping around physically trying to find my beard, the next thought that comes into my mind is that it's so dark in here, you can't seem to see your hand in front of your face. So I brought my hand up to where my face should be, and it seemed to pass straight through, as if there was no physical form there. I thought, that's impossible. You can't miss your head. I went for my physical body, absolutely nothing. What the heck's going on? It's like I'm out of my physical form. It's like I'm transparent, yet I have the sensation of being a total human being standing there. Ian, who I am, appears to be standing here. What's happened?
The experience is vividly real. It's just as real as this experience right now. It doesn't have any hallucinatory or dreamlike qualities. So this darkness is extremely scary. And you can see in this picture here that after this young artist draws us darkness, we see the darkness then start to evolve into what he calls a light, and then ultimately what he thinks is heaven, which for this young Boy Scout is a pup tent in a golden field. So the elements of the experience involve the cessation of input from this reality, the perception of darkness, since we're still conscious, and then the perception of yet another reality. And that reality is primarily based on our own perceptions of what happens when we die. So we die the life we live.
According to the facts, NDE is a phenomenon which exists. It is not hallucinations, but a real, inexplicable conscious experience. But what have academics to say who researched this mysterious phenomenon?
And there are broadly three perspectives on the near-death experience. You've got sceptical explanations, which usually argue that the near-death experience is some kind of brain abnormality near death, or some chemical abnormality in the brain near death. And then you've got parapsychological explanations, which argue that the near-death experience might not be a genuine glimpse of a heaven, but nevertheless contains some paranormal components, say for example extrasensory perception. And then you've got psychological explanations in the near-death experience, which argue that it's some kind of motivated fantasy, that someone perceiving themselves to be near death becomes very afraid and constructs out of fantasy in their own mind a heavenly realm to which they go. The problem with that final explanation is it doesn't account for negative experiences. Why would people who are fearful of death be motivated to fantasize about hell. That's counterproductive. So I think psychological explanations are the poorest explanations of the near-death experience. It's either going to boil down to there's genuinely a heaven or a hell, or brain chemicals are causing the experience.
Near-death experiences are the last experience that any of us will have while we're still alive. They're misnamed. They're not the near-death experiences at all, but they're the dying experience. This isn't a belief that I have. This, to me, is a scientific fact that has been documented now by 15 years of mainstream scientific research. What we've learned in the last 15 years is in the process of dying, several astonishing and counterintuitive things happen. Namely, the dying person has a complete return to consciousness. They're alert and aware of what's going on around them, even if they seem to be comatose. And they have an expanded sense of consciousness that extends beyond their body. How do we know this isn't just a dream or a weird hallucination? Dreams happen to people who are sleeping at night and are associated with certain brainwave activity. So clearly it's absurd to think near-death experiences would be a dream. What about being hallucinations? Chaotic dysfunctioning of the dying brain? Absolutely. They could be that. There's no person can dispute whether these experiences are the normal functioning of the brain at the point of death, or rather represent some sort of chaotic hallucinatory activity. Remember, hallucinations involve the perception of something that isn't real. So when we die, we're alert, we're conscious, we're aware of this reality, so certainly people having near-death experiences accurately describe what's happening in this reality. But the key element of the near-death experience is that we perceive, I say we, as all of us are going to have this experience, we perceive another reality superimposed over this one. So it's then a matter of religious belief systems as to whether you think that other reality is real or not. So that's